All right, welcome to the Two Sons podcast. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Hope all of you guys are having an incredible week. We are going to be breaking down the House of the Dragon
season finale
today. Couple things quickly before we get started. If you guys could please subscribe to the YouTube channel, we would sincerely appreciate that. We also have some social media profiles. You can find a link to those in the description of this video. If you guys could follow us there as well, we would appreciate that. Before we start the House of the Dragon finale, I did, and this is going to all just go over your head, mister. I've never seen Game of Thrones. But I did just see, I did just watch the Battle of Winterfell with Carly on Monday night. We've been doing our rewatch. And
dude, by the way, I'm still shook from the Battle of the Bastards that you showed me.
Yeah. Dude,
what was that?
Battle scene.
Friday?
Yeah.
Thursday?
Yeah, I forced Luke to watch the entire Battle of the Bastards episode so he could just get a feel for the type of combat that you see in late Game of Thrones.
Dude.
It was intense.
I am so glad I do not live on that world.
Dude, oh my goodness. Well, we did agree after rewatching Battle of the Bastards that the pile of bodies that forms is a little bit too rapid and unrealistic.
All of a sudden, it's just there. There's thousands of dead bodies.
Yeah, 13 bodies deep. Yeah.
I know, like literally 13 bodies deep. It's so insane.
So, again, like, there's a build-up for 8 seasons.
Yeah.
7+ seasons to this, the long night. And, you know, the biggest thing that stood out to me, so in the end of season 7, Jon Snow gets this terrible idea. Actually, no, it's Tyrion's terrible idea. He goes, what if we brought one of the dead to Cersei and showed it to her? Because Tyrion is now the hand of the queen to Daenerys. So it's kind of like this cool, like, Lannister kind of Civil War thing going on. And he basically goes like, we need to go north and we need to get one of the dead and bring it to Cersei. If we do, she might grant us a truce. And if she grants us a truce, then we can go north and beat the Night King and then come back down and resume the battle, basically. And which was a terrible idea because they go north and then the Night King ends up killing one of the dragons.
Oh, geez.
And they get one of the dead whites or whatever they call them, Wights, and they bring him down. But the Night King revives one of the dragons and takes the dragon down and uses the dragon to basically blow a hole in the wall.
Dang.
And then march south. So it ends up being the catastrophic mistake that nearly cost mankind. But
they were gonna do it somehow, though. You know what I mean?
Of course, yeah. They were gonna find a way to get through. But then they drop the white in front of Cersei, and Cersei's like, okay, I will fight for you guys, and I'll send the armies north with you. And of course, she's just lying. So when they leave, she just immediately takes back all the territory and bolsters her army with sellswords and stuff to prepare for it, because Cersei is just the worst, right? But like, what's funny is like everyone. So they basically there's a group of wildlings that gets back to Winterfell, and they're like, hey. We had to go around the Night King's army to get here. It's going to be here by the end of the night tonight. Like, this shit's going down right now, right? And so everyone is like in the castle, just like having some wine and like just looking at each other like, we're going to die tonight, right?
Jeez.
And then like what ends up happening is they have this massive Dothraki horde, and they like send the Dothraki horde into the dead, and their swords are all on fire. And all you just see in the distance is all the flames just like slowly disappear.
Oh no.
And you're like, oh no. And there's like they did such a good job in that episode of capturing the pure hopelessness, because when the dead finally charge into the lines of soldiers which are set up outside, they basically have lines of soldiers, and then they have trenches that they plan to light on fire, and then there's the walls, and then they have, you know, obviously all the important people inside the castle. And when the army of the dead runs into the lines of soldiers outside the walls, they literally are. It's a wave, and it's like they're all climbing on each other. It's not like lines of soldiers. It's a wave that's like 15 feet tall of like dead bodies that are like,
jeez,
like crawl and it's like they immediately just start just messing everybody up. And there's this moment where they look up on the wall and you see Sansa, and Sansa's been fighting Jon the last like entire season and a half, because Jon's like, we need to be allies with everybody because we need to get ready for this Night King to come down. And Sansa's like, no, we're the North, we don't serve anybody, we're on our own, kind of thing. And then Sansa's just like standing on top of the wall, just like completely terrified as she's watching like just waves of dead bodies just like going through, and like through the whole episode, because I'm not going to rehash the whole thing, but they just slowly and methodically just showed everybody entirely hopeless through the entire episode. And then of course at the end, the Night King gets right up to Brandon Stark, who's the three-eyed raven at this point, long story, but he's to kill him and essentially doom the entire living. And Arya comes out of nowhere with a dagger and like jumps to go get the Night King, and the Night King catches her left arm and catches her by the throat. And you're like, oh, it's over. But she drops the knife and like catches it with her right hand and stabs him right in the chest. And then he disappears, and then all the White Walkers disappear, and then all the dead fall over. And it's like you're doomed, and then you're saved at the last second by Arya.
That's pretty cool.
It was really cool. And now this is my third time watching all the way through Game of Thrones to this point. And of course the show goes off the rails after that, because they butcher the end of it. But like, I will say, like, it's one of the most interesting villains in any TV series or movie that I've ever seen, the Night King. And there is a hopeless. I've always said like the shows that truly capture hopelessness are the ones that have the best like good versus evil type of dynamic. And I think Palpatine's actually a great example of this, where like the Empire, like you even see it with the Rebellion, like everything that they accomplish is by this thinnest and slightest of margins, and because the Empire just seems so imposing, and it's so difficult to win. And like, just bravo to George R.R. Martin, man. Like, you nailed it. You nailed it with the Night King, man. That was really good stuff. And one day I will convince Luke to watch it.
Yeah, new job. Hopefully I can start finding more time and get into it a little bit more.
And we'll do something like, we'll get you like a special therapist to help you like talk through all of the grossly over the top violence.
A special therapist. That is so funny. Okay, yeah, we'll do that. If you can find me a special Game of Thrones therapist to be able to tolerate the show itself, then I'll do it. Or we can just keep doing this too, which is a lot of fun, where you just tell me, everything that happens.
Jason recites Game of Thrones to Luke. That'll be like our summer entertainment when there's no other shows going on. Okay, so a lot going on in this episode. It was interesting how I thought it was really cool how they kind of divided episode 9 and episode 10 into basically the Green Council and then the Black Council. Basically, like, here's what the Greens did right when Viserys died, and here's what the Reds did, or the Blacks did right when Viserys died. And so a couple things. So Rhaenyra immediately miscarries.
Yeah.
When she hears the news.
Cord strangulation.
So what's funny too is I remember when I was watching the clip, it looked kind of like a deformed child a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I double checked with some of the actual lore from George R.R. Martin, and what happens is that's very similar to the book. She goes into labor immediately when the news comes through, but she gives birth to a stillborn, but the stillborn is also like deformed. It has like apparently like some like weird like dragon type of features, like some weird stuff there. Couple parallels there. Daenerys Targaryen, when she gives birth to Khal Drogo's baby as a stillborn, it had some weird dragon-like qualities.
No way.
So there must be like some weird thing that happens with Targaryen women where like when they have like a miscarriage, it's like weird dragon-esque type of stuff, which is really, really weird stuff. But just like, I don't know, Game of Thrones lore, it is what it is.
Or I hate to say this, maybe she's into dragon things. Maybe that is a dragon baby.
Not likely, but you never know. George R.R. Martin had a twisted mind, as we know.
Oh yeah.
So everything is fair game at that point,
right?
So basically, this is the order of operations here is they immediately decide that they need to secure additional allies, because Daemon basically says we've got like 20 knights and like 300 men at arms,
Not much.
and like 100 crossbowmen, and like that's it. Basically, is what he says. So essentially, they thought their best opportunity to gain allies is to send the two heirs, Rhaenyra's heirs, on their dragons to Lord Boros Baratheon at Storm's End. They're going to send Lucerys, the younger child, down there, and then they're going to send Jacaerys, the older child, the heir to the Iron Throne. They're going to send him to basically to the north, and he's going to stop at the Eyrie and try to get the Knights of the Vale to fight, and then he's going to stop at White Harbor, and he's going to stop at Winterfell to get Lord Cregan Stark. And basically that's where he's going to be sent, and we will see that all in season 2, I'm assuming. But the grand finale of this episode, and we'll get to all the little details in a minute, but the thing that actually starts the Dance of Dragons, and it happens very similarly to what happens in the book. There's a couple of slight differences, but basically Lucerys shows up and makes the case that he should obey his oath. Lord Boros is like, "What are you giving me, bro?" And then,
he's the worst, huh?
Yeah, that was definitely an interesting. I do think it's very interesting through Game of Thrones history. How, and I think this is George R.R. Martin's intention, but like every family kind of has these like distinct qualities.
Okay.
So for instance, like no Stark has ever disobeyed an oath. And so like it's like Ned Stark is super honorable, and Jon Snow, who's a Stark, is super honorable.
Okay.
And like Cregan Stark ends up actually obeying his pledge to Rhaenyra at the end. And ironically, the one Stark we know that disobeys an oath is Robb Stark when he promises to marry Lord Frey's daughter, and he ends up getting killed as a result. So like kind of, but like the Baratheons are like kind of fat slobs, and they're kind of like, you know, a little bit more off the cuff. And it's funny that Lord Boros Baratheon ends up being kind of like his descendant Robert Baratheon,
right,
who ends up being kind of like that, which I thought was interesting. And then the Lannisters are all just like backstabbing, like just out for themselves,
just do whatever they need to do
whatever they need to do to save the family. But yeah, so essentially the one thing that was a little bit exaggerated, Vhagar, according to the books, is 5 times bigger.
Not Godzilla sized.
Than Lucerys' dragon. Not so big that he could literally just eat Lucerys' dragon in one bite.
Can we talk about that? That
Dude.
was insane. The way that was portrayed was actually really interesting. Or I thought it was very intriguing. It just dragon bits just flopping in the wind, falling to the ground.
Like he ate a bat. Yeah, it was insane. So
like he ate a bat. That's exactly what it looked like.
He chopped through a bat. Like, and
I wonder, like, I was like, I wonder if Luke survived. And then like a second goes by, and I'm like, there's no way. There's no way that Lucerys survived,
dude. So in the book,
which by the way, I'm named after him.
He shows up at Storm's End, and he sees Vhagar.
Mm-hmm.
I love how they gave Vhagar like kind of like a gullet, or I don't know what you call it, but like a turkey neck, basically, because it's like such a unique characteristic for him that makes him look like old and distinguished,
right?
And like the lightning strikes, and you see his shadow in the background, and
just a silhouette.
Game of Thrones has always
dragon.
Nailed the cinematography.
Yeah,
it is one of their best qualities of that entire like genres. It's just the cinematography is incredible. You see Vhagar in the background. That's what happens in the book too. Lucerys sees that there. Just like in the book, Boros Baratheon goes like, "Hey," because Aemon basically says, "I want to cut your eye out for me," basically, and Boros is like, "You're not doing this here. Like, get out. Get out." And so then he escorts him to his dragon, right? In the book, though, there's a lot of like it's up in the air how things went down with the dragons. Like, and I kind of think this is cool about George R.R. Martin. Like, he invented this universe. He could have been like, this is exactly what happened, but instead, like, he portrays it as histories similar to the way medieval history is documented. So he'll be like, some folks believe this happened, and some folks believe this happened, and really no one knows.
It feels very real.
Exactly.
Then because of that.
Exactly. It feels exactly. And it's ironic because we talked about earlier in the series, Dance of the Dragons is actually based on a real a secession conflict that took place in England. So like it's all very
there's two sides to every story type vibe.
Exactly.
It creates a lot of depth.
What is not in the book is any mention of it being basically dragons going rogue, which I thought was a really cool touch.
Oh, okay.
To all this, because essentially, like, you see they set that stage when Lucerys gets to his dragon and his dragon is unsettled.
Right.
And he's like, calm, obey, listen. Like, he's trying to calm him down, and the dragon's like all distressed because there's like this crazy storm coming in, right? And then the dragon loses his mind and shoots fire at Vhagar's neck. What an idiot.
Which, okay, like, what's your end game there?
Oh,
You're
dude.
shooting fire at a dragon.
Oh.
Can we stop?
Yeah, and a dragon that's
not?
at least 100 times bigger than you. Like,
I know. Could we just stop?
Dude, and it was just like, Vhagar was just at that point, it was like, I'm going to kill this little dude. Like, this dude has no idea what kind of mess he just got in.
Oh, my God.
But I thought it was interesting how Aemond at the end was like, no, Vhagar, no.
Yeah.
And then it ends up killing.
And then he was deeply unsettled afterwards.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what's cool about that is it's one of the biggest Game of Thrones dynamics that they get into, because just seeing this with season 8 of Game of Thrones, or season 7 of Game of Thrones, when they present Cersei with the dead body that's alive to try to convince her to join, they go to the dragon pits. And at the dragon pits, there's all these like skeletons on the ground, and the skeletons are of very small sizes. And basically, what happened is when after the Dance of Dragons, all the dragons that were alive were kept in chains because of all the damage that they did.
Oh, wow.
And so as a result, like, they all shrunk and shriveled and died, right? But it's interesting because, like, at the end of the day, like, there's a lot of mention from Daenerys in Game of Thrones, in this particular show, like, the Targaryens can ride the dragons, but then it turns out anybody can ride the dragons.
Yeah.
But, like, really, the dragons are kind of like
doing what they want.
They're kind of doing what they want, man. And essentially, it becomes clear that, like, you can't have them be like a significant player in this universe because they're just too dangerous.
Yeah.
And essentially, like, think of it this way: Vhagar and his random little conflict with the other little dragon ends up sparking a civil war that just burns half of the country to the ground.
Right.
Like, literally. So it's like, at the end of the day, like, you have to kind of like understand that, like, life was better without the dragons.
Right.
And then Game of Thrones ends with Daenerys Targaryen literally burning King's Landing to the ground with Drogon, her big ass dragon, and it's like, oh, this is actually not.
It's
like,
essentially a nuclear bomb.
Yeah,
right.
That's a great comp. It's like, it's like nuclear warfare. Like, at the end of the day, like, it has no place in humanity because it just is too
powerful.
destructive.
Yeah,
it's too much power for any man to have control over.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And it just sets off a domino effect. Like, oh, you want to set off your dragons? Well, like, we've got ours. Watch ours, and then both sides just get decimated.
Exactly. Basically that ends up triggering the war. I won't spoil what happens, but Daemon and Rhaenyra almost immediately get revenge for what happens to Lucerys. You'll see what ends up happening. We have no idea what happens with Lucerys yet. That happens in the next season. A couple of specific things. Let's stay on the dragons for a minute.
Okay.
So do you remember when Daemon walks into that cell?
Yeah.
And he sings in Old Valyrian, and then that dragon starts lighting stuff on fire in the sky?
That just ornery, crusty-looking dragon.
That is not his dragon.
Okay, I figured it wasn't.
That is a dragon named Vermithor.
Is it wild?
He is 100 years old. He used to be Jaehaerys' dragon. Jaehaerys was the king from the opening scene.
Okay.
The one that had to choose the heir and ended up choosing Viserys.
Okay. Uh-huh.
So Jaehaerys rode Vermithor. It was the third largest dragon of the Targaryen era, behind Balerion the Dread, who was the biggest, and Vhagar. And so Vermithor is nearly as big as Vhagar. But Daemon is essentially trying to tame him to give him a rider.
Wow.
For the sake of kind of like, because essentially there's that moment where they're kind of standing over the tables, and Rhaenyra.
That table is so cool, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
Side note, incredible.
Yeah, that table actually is in Game of Thrones when Stannis Baratheon uses it.
So cool.
But basically, at one point, Daemon lists off all the dragons and goes like, we have this dragon, that dragon, this dragon, that dragon.
Right. I remember that.
We have these wild dragons. We have this like a couple. He said he had like a dozen dragon eggs or something like that. Like, they've got tons and tons of dragons, but like, it's also clear that they need to get riders because they don't have enough riders. Because from what I understand, the only people that can ride the dragons right now are Daemon, Rhaenyra, Rhaena, the two Corlys Valerian grandchildren, Daemon's
Right.
kids from the marriage that he had to Corlys's daughter, and then Jacaerys and Lucerys. So I think they only have 7 riders for like 17 dragons. So like they need to. That becomes a big plot point as things progress. Is the Blacks need to like find people to ride dragons.
I see.
And they're trying to tame.
They need to bolster their dragon riders.
Vermithor, yeah. So the last the last thing that happened in this episode that we need to get to is Daemon choking Rhaenyra.
Yes.
So what was your takeaway from that scene?
I think ultimately Daemon is calling the shots just because of his. It was number one. He's probably a better military mind
Probably,
than her.
yeah.
And then obviously his physical stature is greater than hers, right? And then I hate to say it, but that actually means a lot when you're face to face. Yeah, in Game of Thrones.
In Game of Thrones, men are in charge. They're straight up. They come very straightforward with that.
Right, and that being whatever he wants done, essentially, if it comes to brute force, he'll have an upper hand with her. Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought like. Essentially, so clearly what drives it is Rhaenyra asks him about the Song of Ice and Fire.
Right, and he thinks it's he thinks it's BS.
Well,
right?
It's not so much that he thinks it's BS. It's he's deeply, deeply, deeply offended that that Viserys never trusted him.
Oh, I see.
Because you have to remember at the beginning when Viserys is in charge and he gives birth to that baby Aegon that died, the one that they light on fire in the opening episode, he wants that to be the heir because there is no heir,
right?
And the rules of Westeros dictate that his brother would become king if he ever died. So Daemon is effectively the heir to start.
I see.
Until he names Rhaenyra as his heir. But the first thing he does when he names Rhaenyra as his heir is tell her about the Song of Ice and Fire.
Right.
It literally happens right away.
And that's why we feel like that's legitimate, him wanting her to be heir.
Exactly.
That's one of the reasons, right?
Of course.
Yeah.
And Daemon essentially finds out in that moment that Viserys trusted Rhaenyra more than he ever trusted him.
Well, and of course, Daemon was literally a loose cannon.
Out of control loose cannon.
Just completely out of control then. He's pulled the reins back a touch.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Well, and he represents everything that Viserys was not.
Right.
And so I think that was part of like the kind of diversion between the two of them. But essentially, like, it was funny because he chokes Rhaenyra, which is a power move on his part. Obviously a nasty, awful power move, but a power move. And then her power move back to him is like, oh, he didn't trust you, did he? And then he just walks out of the room, and you could tell Rhaenyra kind of like smirks a little bit, and it's just like, but like I did double check this with the books. Obviously, there's no mention of that specific scene, but Rhaenyra and Daemon are very much in lockstep during the war. Like they are very much like in agreement on what they should do. They are teammates. They're compatriots. Like they're some of the dissent that is demonstrated between the two of them in that episode is not in the books. But
I see.
For the record, the books are only a guide, essentially a historical guide. And like we talked about earlier, George R.R. Martin intentionally left everything kind of open ended.
Okay.
And so from that standpoint, like we can expect them to divert from different different
to
moments
some capacity
in a bunch of different ways. I did forget one scene. So one of the twins, Eric, one of the Erics, I can't remember if it's Rick or Eric, but one of the twins brings Viserys' crown to Rhaenyra. Daemon crowns her, and then the Hand of the King shows up. Mr. Otto Hightower.
Right. Boo, Otto.
They trap him on the wall behind a dragon in an army. And he demands, Rhaenyra bend the knee. Of course, Daemon drops this incredible one-liner that was like, I think he said something like, "I would rather burn my children than have them serve wine and do whatever for your drunken something, like." Bad words king basically, and just a dope one-liner from Daemon, just to be like, not only is it no, but screw you, buddy.
But a giant middle finger no.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then Rhaenyra runs up and just takes off the Hand of the King symbol and throws it off into the ocean. That was a power move.
That was.
But I did think this was an important kind of distinction in this episode. They paint Rhaenyra as the one with restraint.
Mm-hmm. Right.
She refuses to hurt Otto because she doesn't want to be the one to strike the first blow in the war. Rhaena has that cool moment where she's talking to Corlys and she basically says like, hey, like all these men are in that room trying to push her to go to war and she's the only one demonstrating restraint.
Right.
She needs you to counsel her basically. And then an interesting scene, Otto hands her that page.
Yeah, the page
from the book when they were children.
Yeah, like episode 1.
Exactly. And basically Rhaenyra goes like, my job as heir to the Iron Throne when I was named by Viserys was to protect the realm,
right?
To serve the realm's best interests. And if I stake my claim, we will go to war, and it might not be good for the realm, essentially. And I do think...
Completely rational thought.
The way they're painting it is that had they not done that, had Vhagar not eaten Lucerys, that they might not have gone to war, and she might have bent the knee.
I see. Because there's a switch when she finds out that her son has been killed.
When she finds out, like it was funny because it was building for a while. Really cool scene. Slow panning in.
Yeah, I thought it was cool too.
Damon's kind of walking along the left side of the table. Everyone's
incredible regret on his face.
Yep, everyone's kind of going through their paces there around the table, and she tells her to, and I'm like, I look over at Carly. I'm like, we're gonna get an epic stare down right now, aren't we? And then she turns around, and it's just like the devil is in her eyes.
Right.
Like, now it's like I will burn this country.
Blue steel, just. No, it was. That completely changed everything.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it did.
Yeah.
Did you have anything else from this episode?
No, I'm
what were
enjoying
your thoughts
it.
from season 1?
Yeah, so that's my thoughts, right? Oh, and actually, I've got a question for you. Actually, so you're correct. The plot in Game of Thrones is incredible. The execution gives me the willies.
I get it, dude.
Yeah, no, and here's the deal. Did I enjoy Game of Thrones? Yes. Yeah. So no, you're totally right. I've got a question for you though. After seeing all of Game of Thrones and all of the new Lord of the Rings, which one did you like better?
House of the Dragon.
Yeah.
I mean, a couple things. I am certainly more bought into the source material,
right,
with Game of Thrones.
Right.
I just have an appreciation for it. I also think it's a little more well done. Like Lord of the Rings was cool. The scale of it was amazing. It was the cinematography was great.
Mm-hmm.
I thought the execution overall was a little bit more cheesy.
Okay.
In Lord of the Rings, which made it harder for me to buy in. Like the acting, like Otto Hightower, Rhaenyra, Corlys, everybody, even Sir Criston Cole's little punk ass. All of those characters are so it's almost like dark. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's just darker. Maybe that's what I appreciated about it, because but there's like there's more power behind the characters, I think, in Game of Thrones, and I'm just more bought in that way.
I think that's a fine argument.
What about
you? I think overall, I'm going to enjoy the progression of Lord of the Rings more. I feel more bought into the storyline of, the building of all the rings. I'm very much so interested in that. But dude, you're right. I ended up really enjoying, Game of Thrones. I really did. I can tell you that. If I had to pick one show to watch for the rest of my life, it would probably be Lord of the Rings out of the two. Mm-hmm. But mainly because it's not as dark. It's a little bit more lighthearted.
But when I say dark, I'm referring more to like the characters and their flaws.
I understand.
It's like
there's a lot of development with them, and it's exceedingly intricate to the point where you and I can have in-depth conversations about
a personality.
Yeah. And in Lord of the Rings, it's almost like one personality exists, and that's how it just drives the entire story, right? But in Game of Thrones, you see evolution of almost every single character you see evolve over time, which I think is a really cool point of Game of Thrones. And it highlights the way that, we all change throughout time. Like 18-year-old Luke is way different than 29-year-old Luke, right? And I think it's almost more realistic in the Game of Thrones world, and it's really fun to see that evolution occur. Like we've almost seen, we saw Alicent evolve like twice now, right? Where she was a young girl, wanted to be friends, all she wanted to do was be friends with someone, and then she all of a sudden gains power and starts to have to make decisions.
Power she didn't even want.
She didn't want, and then she buys into that, and then almost pulls the reins back a little bit and tries to fix problems that she had with Rhaenyra. So
and all she had to pay was feet.
Right. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I'm so glad you brought that up. She was aware of that, right? Is that how she gets information from him? Like she him.
She pays Larys with feet and gets back basically service.
That's what I thought. That's okay. I just wanted to make sure because
there pretty straightforward, Luke.
No, I didn't know.
It's a foot for info exchange.
I know. So I didn't know though if. So I figured that was the case, but I didn't know if she didn't realize what he was doing. I figured she did, but a foot for info. I guess feet are pretty well covered up in those era, in that era.
Yeah.
Right?
So for him, it's like the anticipation is just off the charts. No, so
here we are just talking about the justness of Lord of the Rings and the wholesomeness. And but what about the feet in Game of Thrones?
So okay, and I with the Game of Thrones thing, the gratuitous violence and the incredible depravity is played up. It's played up. It can be pulled back for me.
It
doesn't bother me, but I'm really good at just ignoring that stuff for the most part. I totally understand and respect that it does bother you. And the other thing too is I knew that going in, but it's just in terms of storytelling and plot depth and good versus evil, but those lines being blurred, I think Game of Thrones is right up your alley in so many different ways, which is why I thought you'd enjoy it.
Right.
And this is the last thing I'll say about it. I'm so glad you brought up the changing characters because it's the coolest part of the Game of Thrones experience.
That's what really interests me.
Is you see Sansa standing on the walls of Winterfell, wearing one of her nice winter dresses, all cleaned up and nice, and it feels important because of the torture she went through for 6 seasons, basically being sold off to every traitor of her family as a wife,
Right.
And Arya Stark, when she kills the Night King, but you literally watch her for 6 seasons, go through so much that basically crafted her into one of the greatest warriors in Westeros, and Jon Snow and his development, and Daenerys Targaryen in her development, ironically, hers is the only one that doesn't make a ton of sense. But overall, everyone evolves over the 8 seasons, and then you become so incredibly invested in their outcomes, which is precisely why everyone hated the finale, because then a bunch of weird stuff happens. But it just is, it's right up your alley in terms of that type of plot growth and stuff. And is if you can ever find a way to just I don't know if we need to just censor it out or you need to
I'm fine. I'm fine.
But it definitely is.
I like to play it up a little bit.
Of course, yeah, and we are playing it up for the joke. Luke literally watched all the episodes. You watched the stillborn baby with all the blood and stuff, and I'm sure you were fine, but
yeah, it's definitely that shock and awe. It's here we are being picky, right? So it's we're saying Lord of the Rings could be more intense, and then we're but Game of Thrones is too intense, pull it back. So it's just us being picky, but I think
Star Wars could be more intense.
I agree. There are parts of Game of Thrones where you're just oh my gosh, that was completely unnecessary.
Oh,
right?
Absolutely.
And you've kind of talked about that. It's kind of shock and awe, which is one thing that I could do without. But overall, Jay, I'm enjoying it.
Mm-hmm. So it'll be about 1.5 years because they are starting production on season 2 this spring, and they're expecting it to release the following spring. So it's going to be a little while until we get to some Game of Thrones. But that is all we have for today. As always, we sincerely appreciate your guys' support. We're going to be doing Tales of the Jedi next week as well as some more Andor. So we got plenty of content on the horizon, and then there's a new High Republic book coming out, and we still have Thrawn to get to. So plenty of stuff to get to. As always, we appreciate your guys' support, and we will see you next time.
Thanks a lot.